Welcome to Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode we explore a chilling possibility. Is the government manipulating the weather? From engineered hurricanes to earthquakes triggered by unseen technologies, some believe nature's most destructive forces may be anything but natural. Could storms be used as silent weapons? And if so, who's controlling the skies? Stay tuned. In the wake of World War II, as global powers grappled with the dawn of atomic-age weaponry, a quieter but equally ambitious race began, one aimed not at the ground, but the sky. In 1946, scientists from General Electric conducted the first successful cloud seeding experiment, releasing dry ice into a cumulus cloud and producing man-made snowfall over Schroon Lake, New York. The breakthrough was hailed as a miracle of modern science, proof that humans could influence the weather. By the early 1950s, weather modification had captured the imagination of military planners and government scientists alike. If clouds could be seeded to make rain, could they also be manipulated to deny it? Could storms be weaponized? Could snow, wind, or fog become tools of war? The idea wasn't dismissed. In fact, it was actively explored. The US government established the Presidential Advisory Committee on Weather Control in 1953, charged with examining both civilian and military applications of atmospheric manipulation. The Cold War only deepened these ambitions. Weather, once a symbol of nature's indifference, became a potential battlefield. In the minds of strategists, the skies were no longer neutral. They could be steered, harnessed, even turned into weapons against an enemy. The notion was supported by respected figures like physicist Irving Langmuir, who famously warned that weather control could become more dangerous than nuclear war if left unchecked. Then came the Vietnam War. From 1967 to 1972, the US Air Force implemented a classified project known as Operation Popeye. The goal? To extend the monsoon season over the Ho Chi Minh Trail by cloud seeding with silver iodide, thereby turning enemy supply routes into impassable rivers of mud. The operation was a military secret for years until exposed by journalists and further confirmed by the Pentagon Papers. Its success, while controversial, was undeniable. Rainfall increased, roads washed out, movement was disrupted. For the first time in modern history, weather had been manipulated for combat purposes. The public reaction was intense. In response, the United Nations passed the Environmental Modification Convention in 1977, prohibiting the hostile use of weather modification techniques in warfare. But even as the ink dried on that treaty, many wondered, did signing an agreement really stop the research? Or did it simply push it underground? The 1980s saw a relative quiet in public discourse, but behind closed doors, weather modification programs continued to receive funding, especially in the Soviet Union and the United States. At the same time, civilian efforts to control weather, particularly through cloud seeding, were expanding globally. It was during this period that a new type of suspicion began to emerge. If weather could be used to win wars, what else might it be used for? What started as scientific inquiry had become something far more complex. A mixture of innovation, secrecy, and geopolitical rivalry had laid the groundwork for one of the most persistent conspiracy theories of the modern era, that weather was no longer a force of nature but a force of intent. One of the central pieces of evidence often cited by proponents of weather warfare theory is the existence and operation of HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Constructed in the remote landscape of Gakona, Alaska in the early 1990s, HAARP is an ionospheric research facility funded by the US Air Force, Navy, and other agencies. Its stated purpose is to study the behavior of the ionosphere to improve communication and navigation systems. But to many observers, HAARP's technology, capable of sending high-frequency radio waves into the upper atmosphere, raises more questions than answers. The facility's large field of antenna arrays has become iconic in conspiracy circles. Critics claim the technology could manipulate weather by heating specific portions of the ionosphere, altering jet streams and potentially steering storms. In 1995, the book Angels Don't Play This HAARP popularized the notion that the facility could not only control weather, but possibly trigger earthquakes and disrupt global weather systems through electromagnetic pulses. The authors pointed to patents filed by researchers affiliated with the project, some of which describe advanced capabilities such as altering atmospheric conditions to reflect or deflect solar radiation. These documents are often used to support the claim that weather control has moved far beyond cloud seeding. One patent in particular, US Patent number 4686605, describes a method for altering the atmosphere with electromagnetic radiation. Though initially dismissed as theoretical, its presence in the public record is regularly invoked as proof that at least some of this technology exists or is in development. Outside the United States, similar suspicions have emerged. After the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, Venezuelan state media accused the US of causing the quake using a tectonic weapon, allegedly tested through HAARP. The claim, attributed to then-President Hugo Chavez, was never formally substantiated, but nevertheless gained traction across alternative media networks. A few years later, after Japan's Fukushima disaster, new voices emerged suggesting electromagnetic manipulation might have played a role. Again, no hard proof was ever presented, but the pattern of accusations continued to follow major natural disasters. Proponents of the theory also point to irregularities in weather patterns that defy seasonal expectations. Sudden temperature drops, inexplicable droughts, or unusually symmetrical storm formations are often cited as signs of intervention. Satellite images showing geometric cloud patterns or strange ripples in the atmosphere are circulated online as visual evidence that something unnatural is occurring in the skies. Whether these anomalies are caused by electromagnetic interference or simply misunderstood meteorological phenomena remains up for debate, but for those who believe, the patterns are difficult to ignore. Finally, there's the widespread and controversial chemtrail theory. It alleges that long-lasting trails left behind by airplanes are not merely water vapor, but chemical or biological agents dispersed into the atmosphere. While mainstream science attributes these trails to ordinary contrails, believers argue that the frequency, duration, and unusual dispersion patterns point to coordinated activity, possibly tied to weather modification or climate control. Together, these claims form the scaffolding of a theory that suggests weather is no longer beyond our reach, and that its manipulation may already be happening, whether the public is ready to accept it or not. One of the most persistent claims made by weather warfare theorists revolves around the unusually consistent patterns that appear in satellite imagery during major storms. Advocates argue that certain hurricanes and typhoons show geometric cloud formations, spirals, grids, or straight-line edges that do not appear to follow typical meteorological behavior. These patterns, they say, suggest artificial interference. Circulated widely on online forums and through independent researchers, these images are often paired with timestamps and trajectory comparisons to imply that certain storms were not just formed, but potentially guided. A key example frequently cited is Hurricane Katrina. The devastating 2005 storm that struck New Orleans is remembered for its size, speed, and the catastrophic aftermath. But among conspiracy theorists, Katrina is also notable for the way it stalled in the Gulf of Mexico before striking land. Some claim this hesitation, and the precision with which it ultimately hit New Orleans, could not have occurred without some form of steering or manipulation. They point to anomalies in the jet stream and upper atmosphere disturbances as potential signs of external influence. Similarly, Hurricane Harvey in 2017 drew suspicion for its unprecedented rainfall. The storm hovered over southeast Texas for days, dumping over 60 inches of rain in some areas. Proponents of weather manipulation suggest that such stationary behavior, where a hurricane remains nearly immobile, is highly irregular and possibly induced. They cite fluctuations in atmospheric pressure and HAARP-like activity occurring in nearby regions as indicators that some form of interference might have been at play. Outside of hurricanes, theorists have also turned to earthquakes. The 2010 earthquake in Haiti, which killed over 100,000 people, sparked allegations that the US had tested a seismic weapon under the guise of a humanitarian response. Similar accusations emerged after the 2023 earthquake in Turkey and Syria. On social media, videos circulated showing eerie flashes of light in the sky shortly before the quake, phenomena known as earthquake lights. While geologists have studied this phenomenon and linked it to tectonic stress, conspiracy theorists view it differently, a possible byproduct of energy-based weaponry. Another claim focuses on the unnatural frequency of extreme weather events in specific geographic areas. California's repeated droughts and wildfires, followed by sudden, destructive floods, have raised eyebrows in these circles. Some believe this is indicative of climate control experiments gone awry, or worse, intentional manipulation. They point to government-sponsored weather modification programs, such as the Department of Homeland Security's atmospheric testing, or the U.S. Air Force's long-term interest in controlling weather for strategic advantage. And then there are the patents. Dozens of them. Patents that outline technologies capable of altering precipitation, dispersing particulates, or energizing sections of the ionosphere. The existence of these documents is not in dispute. What remains unclear and heavily debated is how far these technologies have been developed and whether they're being used in secret operations. To those who believe, these claims aren't just circumstantial. They are building blocks in a larger pattern of evidence. A pattern that points toward the quiet militarization of the skies and the possibility that the world's most destructive storms are not entirely acts of God. Skeptics of weather warfare theories argue that many of the claims presented by proponents rely heavily on circumstantial connections, misinterpretation of data, or a lack of understanding of complex atmospheric science. According to mainstream meteorologists and physicists, the weather, particularly large-scale systems like hurricanes, jet streams, and tectonic shifts, is immensely complicated and subject to natural variability that is often misread as manipulation. One of the most common criticisms centers on the alleged geometric patterns observed in cloud formations. Atmospheric scientists explain that under certain conditions, clouds can take on surprisingly structured appearances due to natural interactions between wind shear, pressure gradients, and moisture. The formation of wave-like ripples, symmetrical bands, or even grid-like patterns can be entirely consistent with established meteorological principles. To professionals, these are not signs of interference, but visual manifestations of turbulence, convection, and stratification in the atmosphere. The theory that HAARP can manipulate weather or trigger earthquakes has also been met with strong rebuttals. Experts at the University of Alaska, which now operates the HAARP facility, maintain that the energy output of the program is far too small to impact weather systems on a global or even regional scale. The radio waves generated by HAARP are directed upward into the ionosphere, and their purpose is to study how solar radiation affects this layer of the atmosphere, not to alter weather. To contextualize it, scientists often note that a single lightning bolt contains significantly more energy than HAARP's most powerful transmissions. In terms of seismic activity, geophysicists point out that no credible mechanism currently exists by which radio frequencies, especially those from a facility like HAARP, could influence tectonic plates buried miles beneath Earth's surface. Earthquakes, they explain, are caused by the build-up and sudden release of stress between shifting geological plates. These shifts occur deep underground, far beyond the reach of atmospheric-based technologies. Regarding chemtrail theories, aviation experts assert that what many interpret as chemical dispersion are in fact contrails, condensation trails formed when hot, humid air from jet engines mixes with the cold, low-pressure atmosphere at high altitudes. Variations in length and persistence of these trails are attributed to changes in humidity, temperature, and engine type, not the release of unknown substances. Despite repeated calls for evidence, no verifiable samples have been produced, showing unusual or harmful compounds in the air surrounding these trails. Critics also point out that weather warfare on the scale by some conspiracy theorists would require a level of coordination, secrecy, and technological control that borders on implausible. The infrastructure needed to precisely manipulate large weather systems or seismic events would not only be massive, it would almost certainly leave detectable traces in the scientific record. Yet decades of meteorological data, satellite imaging, and seismic monitoring have failed to reveal any anomalies consistent with such manipulation. Still, even in the face of these rebuttals, belief in weather warfare persists. For skeptics, this endurance underscores something deeper: a growing cultural divide between institutional authority and public trust, where explanations, however rational, often fail to dismantle the underlying suspicion that something larger is being kept hidden. The idea that governments might control the weather isn't just a fringe belief. It's a reflection of deeper societal anxieties, often rooted in powerlessness and mistrust. For many, the theory of weather warfare speaks to more than just manipulation of the skies. It touches on cultural fears of surveillance, control, and the potential misuse of advanced technologies by institutions that operate behind closed doors. It offers an explanation, however speculative, for disasters that otherwise seem random, senseless, and overwhelming. In a world increasingly shaped by climate change, rising sea levels, and unpredictable natural catastrophes, people are searching for order in chaos. When wildfires rage through communities, floods destroy homes, or droughts wipe out livelihoods, the emotional toll is immense. For some, the concept that these events might be engineered, however sinister the implication, offers a strange kind of logic. It transforms an impersonal natural world into something intentional, something that can be blamed and perhaps even stopped. Culturally, the theory has become a lens through which people express disillusionment with institutional power. Decades of governmental secrecy, from wartime experiments to intelligence overreach, have created fertile ground for mistrust. Historical revelations, like Operation Popeye or unethical testing on civilian populations, have demonstrated that covert programs are not theoretical, but real, and that oversight can often be an afterthought. Within this context, the leap to believe in covert climate engineering feels, for many, less like paranoia and more like realism. Politically, the idea of weather as a weapon resonates in a world where power is often projected through invisible means: economic sanctions, digital espionage, and cyber warfare. In this climate, it doesn't seem so far-fetched to imagine storms or droughts as forms of geopolitical leverage. The theory reflects broader concerns about sovereignty and global control, where nature itself becomes another front in the struggle between nations or ideologies. Socially, the theory thrives in digital spaces, where decentralized platforms amplify alternative narratives. Online communities provide a sense of belonging to those who feel alienated from mainstream discourse. Weather warfare becomes more than a theory. It becomes a shared language among those who feel dismissed, unheard, or marginalized. The internet in this way doesn't just spread the theory, it gives it structure, coherence, and emotional weight. There's also a psychological dimension. Conspiracy theories, especially ones involving environmental control, allow people to reclaim agency in a world that often feels uncontrollable. If someone, somewhere, is behind the chaos, then perhaps there's a way to confront it. The idea that disasters are manufactured rather than natural offers a grim comfort, one rooted in the belief that the world operates according to hidden rules, even if those rules are dark. Ultimately, the enduring resonance of weather warfare isn't solely about the science or the claims themselves. It's about the questions they provoke. Who really holds the power to shape our world? And if that power exists, what else might be done with it, without our knowledge or consent? In this light, the theory becomes not just a suspicion, but a reflection of a deeper cultural unease that shows no signs of passing. Beyond the realm of documented programs and grounded suspicion lies a much stranger territory, one where weather is not only weaponized, but entangled with theories of global manipulation, deep state agendas, and even interdimensional interference. These more speculative and fringe interpretations often stretch the boundaries of credibility, but they persist nonetheless, sustained by communities convinced that the true scope of weather control is far greater than the public has ever imagined. One of the most unconventional claims involves the belief that weather modification is not simply about geopolitical advantage, but population control. In this narrative, prolonged droughts, targeted floods, or unrelenting storms are part of a wider strategy to destabilize specific regions, disrupt food supply chains, and ultimately reduce population through induced scarcity. Supporters of this theory often point to weather anomalies in already vulnerable nations, patterns they believe are too precise, too frequent, to be natural. They argue that the chaos generated by manipulated climate events serves a long-game purpose, weakening national resilience, increasing dependence on foreign aid, and paving the way for centralized global governance. Another fringe belief links weather warfare to a so-called breakaway civilization, a secret faction of global elites or advanced military entities operating with unknown technology and objectives. According to this theory, weather manipulation is just one tool in a broader arsenal of hidden science. These groups, some say, have access to energy systems capable of modifying planetary dynamics far beyond current public understanding. This might include massive antennas in space, deep ocean resonance systems, or even satellites capable of generating high-frequency pulses that alter atmospheric chemistry. The theory holds that these technologies are not only real, but have been quietly refined over decades under classified budgets and protected by layers of disinformation. Among the most esoteric claims is the belief that weather warfare is not human-made at all, but rather the result of alien or extra-dimensional technology. Some adherents argue that sudden environmental catastrophes, like earthquakes with no precursor tremors or perfectly symmetrical hurricanes, are signs of non-human influence. In these versions of the theory, Earth's weather is being tampered with by external entities, either observing humanity or influencing its development. Whether as a test, a warning, or an unseen war waged above our perception, this theory introduces a cosmic scale to what might otherwise seem like earth-bound machinations. Others lean into spiritual or metaphysical explanations. They suggest that the Earth itself is responding to human consciousness, that increased global suffering, corruption, or imbalance creates energy disturbances that manifest as violent weather. In this model, weather control doesn't come from a machine, but from collective psychic influence. The storms, they say, are Earth's attempt to cleanse or correct spiritual disequilibrium. While these ideas may seem far-fetched, they are important to understand in the broader landscape of belief. They reflect not just distrust of institutions, but a yearning to explain the unexplainable. When storms arrive without warning, when destruction feels targeted or unnatural, the human mind seeks patterns, sometimes in science, sometimes in conspiracy, and sometimes in places where reason gives way to the extraordinary. In recent years, a new wave of developments has added fuel to the already smouldering suspicions surrounding weather manipulation. While mainstream outlets have largely relegated these theories to the margins, certain unexplained incidents and quietly filed policy changes have not gone unnoticed by those watching closely. For many, the story is no longer confined to shadowy Cold War experiments or mid-century scientific ambition. It's evolving in real time. One such development was the quiet reactivation of the HAARP facility in Alaska in 2021. After a period of dormancy, the University of Alaska Fairbanks announced that the facility would resume operations for atmospheric research. Though positioned as an academic transition, the announcement reignited speculation across alternative media channels. Some claimed the timing, coinciding with heightened solar activity and increased natural disasters, was suspicious. While the official explanation pointed to ionospheric studies related to space weather, theorists questioned whether deeper capabilities were once again being tested, this time under the guise of civilian science. In China, large-scale weather modification efforts have also drawn attention. In 2020, the Chinese government announced plans to expand its artificial weather program to cover over 5.5 million square kilometers, an area larger than the entire Indian subcontinent. The stated goal was to reduce drought, manage forest fires, and ensure favorable weather during major events. But critics, both foreign and domestic, warned of unintended consequences. Satellite images in the months that followed revealed peculiar cloud behaviors over parts of Tibet and Xinjiang, areas already marked by political unrest. Some observers began to wonder, could weather now be a tool of domestic control? Elsewhere, strange stories continue to emerge. In 2022, residents of a coastal town in northern Italy reported a bizarre phenomenon. A perfectly circular hole opened in a storm cloud just moments before an intense hailstorm battered the region. The pattern was captured by multiple amateur weather watchers and circulated widely online. Meteorologists cited rare atmospheric pressure shifts as the cause, but within conspiracy forums, the event was quickly labelled as evidence of controlled atmospheric disruption, possibly a test gone wrong. Meanwhile, several US states have introduced or expanded cloud seeding programs in response to drought. Colorado, Nevada, and California have all increased funding for aerial seeding operations, often contracting private firms to carry out the missions. These initiatives are publicly documented and ostensibly benign. But for theorists, they serve as further proof that the infrastructure for weather modification is not just theoretical, it's operational. And if such programs exist openly, they argue, what might be occurring behind the scenes? Leaked emails from private defense contractors have also surfaced, referencing geoengineering viability studies and climate stabilization prototypes. Though these documents are vague and unverified, they have been circulated as possible glimpses into ongoing research. No names, no specifics, just enough ambiguity to deepen the intrigue. Taken together, these developments suggest that the story of weather manipulation is not frozen in the past. It's a moving target, one shaped by technology, geopolitics, and secrecy. And for those who believe each new anomaly, each unexplained event, is not an isolated incident, but part of a growing pattern still unfolding above our heads. From classified cloud seeding missions in Southeast Asia to remote ionospheric research stations in Alaska, the idea of weather as a weapon has evolved from a Cold War ambition into a deeply embedded belief for millions around the world. Along the way, it has blurred the lines between science, strategy, and speculation, raising questions not only about technological limits, but about who gets to control nature and to what end. We began with a look at the historical roots, how early experiments in weather modification sparked a surge of interest from governments and militaries who saw the sky not as a boundary, but as a battlefield. Operations like Popeye, once dismissed as rumours, were later confirmed, reinforcing the notion that environmental manipulation had already been weaponized decades ago. We examined the core claims at the heart of this conspiracy: strange weather patterns, electromagnetic research facilities like HAARP, and unexplained satellite imagery that some say points to engineered disasters. We considered the patents, the satellite photos, the eyewitness accounts, and the atmospheric anomalies that, to some, form an undeniable pattern. We also confronted the voices of skepticism, scientists and experts who argue that many of these claims are based on misunderstanding, visual illusions, or unrelated meteorological phenomena. They point out the technical limitations, the lack of verifiable mechanisms, and the absence of hard evidence. Yet even their rational explanations often fail to quiet the growing chorus of doubt. We looked deeper at the social and cultural underpinnings of this theory, how a loss of faith in institutions, combined with the trauma of natural disasters and the rapid advance of secretive technologies, creates fertile ground for belief. In times of uncertainty, people seek answers, and in weather warfare they find a narrative that makes sense of the chaos, even if it means accepting a dark truth. We explored the far edges of the theory, fringe ideas that stretch into population control, shadow governments, and even non-human interference. These perspectives, while often marginalized, reveal just how wide and elastic the theory has become. For some, it's no longer just about rain or drought, it's about global transformation, driven by forces hidden in plain sight. And we closed in on recent developments. New government programs, resurfaced facilities, unexplained phenomena, and vague disclosures that hint at ongoing experiments. To believers, these are not isolated events, but signs of a larger agenda, one that continues to unfold in the skies above. In the end, the weather warfare theory is not just a question of technology, it's a reflection of trust, of control, and of fear. Whether true or not, it invites us to examine who commands the power to shape the world we live in, and how far they might go to do it. Perhaps the rain still falls where it's meant to, perhaps storms still follow natural currents, or perhaps we're living beneath a sky no longer left to chance. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and this has been another episode of Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. Don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Share this episode with your fellow conspiracy enthusiasts and be sure to connect with us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and exclusive updates. Join us next time for another exciting journey into the world of conspiracy theories. See you then. If you found this episode fascinating and want to dive even deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, consider subscribing for exclusive access to the material they don't want you to hear. As a subscriber, you'll get banned episodes, episodes deemed too controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else, extended director's cut versions of your favorite episodes, early access to new content before it's released to the public, and much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.